Hi everyone. I do miss you guys so much, you have no idea. And just to get right into this, I already have and it's been up for quite some time now, and I know I had to get a little bit better videos, but y'all could get the gist of most of it, okay? I think chapter 11 was the only one that was a little difficult to see. The others, when I was zooming in a little bit more, it helped, but I do now have actually 9, 10, and 11 all up with really good visual. Everything's perfect on those. It's been up for a while. Y'all should have everybody should have already watched all 3 of those, and you should have started reading the chapters and filling out your study guides to get ready for our next test, which will be lecture test number 4 on chapters 9, 10, and 11. I've also sent you out an email with some updated dates on some assignments that are due, and I explained a lot in there, and I'm going to update that again this week to hopefully get to the end of the chapter. I mean the end of the course calendar, try to finish up. We are obviously behind because we missed an entire week due to our extended spring break, and then of course we missed time because trying to get moved to online with that very first test and getting everything typed into the system for a class that was not online took a little time, and we lost some time there. But that's okay, because we're going to make this up. And what's going to help us is that you're not having to come to class, you're at home, so you can watch these videos quickly, you can fill out your study guides and start studying, okay? So we're not going to throw these tests on you really fast, but you have to understand that you can watch these videos not just sitting in my class on Tuesday, Thursday for an hour and a half, but anytime, every day, Monday through Sunday. And I know it's hard on y'all to take extra time to do these in other classes. I know you got other things going on. It's 5:30 right now, and I'm still, I've been sitting in front of the computer all day today working, because I'm like every other faculty member at BIPSI that is trying to take a face-to-face class and move it online. We're working a lot of extra hours because this is important to us and we want to get this done. And I know it's important to you guys to pass this class, to move forward, and to get your certification as a phlebotomist so you can go to work. So that may mean that I have to work some extra hours, put in a little more work to get this stuff up and available to you guys. And you guys may have to give to me a few extra time, get out there, read your chapters, and really do your part to make sure that you're successful. If we both do our parts, and if we both give 110%, we'll get through this, okay? So I'm going to finish up here. This is going forward with some more of chapter 13, okay? And we're just going to get started. Like I said, I'm not going to read each one of these learning objectives to you, because you can pause it and read them yourselves. And again, if you guys have any question whatsoever, anything in these slides you don't understand, does it make sense to you? If on the critical thinking slides you're just not putting it together, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'm available to you to help you in any way I can to make sure that you're successful in this, okay? Because chapter 13 and 14, these are going into the next test, right? So 9, 10, and 11 will be for lecture test number 4, and these are the start of us learning and filling out the study guides for chapter 5, for lecture test number 5. I also put a review up for your lab test that you would have taken when you came back from spring break. Because if you'll remember, when we had a plan, when we left to go at spring break, we didn't know this was going to happen. So we left that Thursday. When you guys left, you knew that you were to go home, finish studying the chapters, and that you were going to come back and you were going to take your lecture test on that Tuesday, lecture test number 3, which thank God we've taken care of that. We've gotten that done. Everybody's done that. And you were going to take your next lab quiz on that Thursday. And that really, we had done everything in lab we needed to do to be successful in taking that lab quiz. We only had a few more things that we needed to get done that dealt specifically with just hands-on technique of drawing blood, right? So you guys should have been spot on ready for your Lecture 3 test, and looking at the scores, y'all did really well. And also, you're ready and were ready for your lab quiz. So that will be up by Wednesday. I sent you out a detailed email on assignments and the changes of due dates on those. And you will get another update on the remainder of assignments out there, tests and things of that nature that will be due, okay? And to save time, we may not have any more discussions. We may just leave all the time that you have left for studying for your lab and lecture test. I am not 100% sure, as no one is right now, as what's going to go on with the labs. But I want y'all to keep up with the test and keep up with reading your chapters, because I feel as though we're going to have the opportunity to do some type of boot camp or something of that nature in the summer, so that y'all can get the rest of your hands-on training that you need, so that you will be ready to start your clinical applications in next semester, okay? So just try to stay on top of this. And again, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, I can't help you if I don't know you need help, okay? So make sure you read your learning objectives, okay? Make sure when our critical thinking slides comes up, make sure that you pause them immediately, read them, take out a piece of paper, write down what you think the answer is, then start the video again, because you want to make sure that you're putting this stuff together that you learn in lab and lecture, and to be able to critically think through these things. And again, please, I won't know you need help if you don't reach out to me, okay? So talking about the geriatric population, okay, the elderly population, if you'll look on page 450 of your textbook, that's where it starts talking about the older adult population, and it comprises approximately 5% of the U.S. population. And more importantly, it uses about 31% of the nation's healthcare services. And in the next 25 years, the geriatric population will have reached over 20% of the total U.S. population. Physical conditions such as arthritis, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, and other disabilities are really prevalent in our geriatric population. And the reason we really want to worry about this and talk about the geriatric population is because that part about 31% of the national healthcare services, these are the patients you're going to run into most of the time in your clinics and in your hospitals, okay? So we want to make sure that we understand the differences in taking care of that geriatric patient. Now, the numbers on our screen here show a slight difference than what's in our textbook. Your textbook is the most up-to-date information, because consequently stuff like 15% of the population, now it's 20% of the, in 25 years, 20% of the population. You can see how these numbers are constantly changing and growing, okay? And we got to understand that more and more of our laboratory tests are being made so that you could do them at the patient's bedside, you can do them at their home, and things like that. And so, in physical conditions that we've talked about, like arthritis and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, these are all disabilities that increase the need for point of care testing, okay, which is typically a skin puncture type of test, okay, and a lot of them are done on the elderly. So talking about the elderly, home and long-term care collections, okay? Direct laboratory services, right? Decentralized laboratory testing, on-site testing, alternate site testing, near patient testing, and point of care testing and bedside testing. These are all different words used to describe this, okay? And as we know, with the growing U.S. elderly population growing, then we will see more increase of these types of testing. So we want to look at physical problems common in older individuals that will affect your ability to do your job correctly. And when we talk about ID in our patient and how that's one of the most important jobs a phlebotomist will do. We have to understand that that's why we don't say, is your name Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith? The reason we don't do that is because a lot of the population we will be caring for are the elderly, and one of their issues is hearing loss. So a lot of times if you say, are you Mr. Smith, they may have thought they heard the right thing, but they didn't. And so then they just answer yes, but that's really not their name. That's why you always say, will you tell me your full name? Okay? Failing eyesight. So sometimes you may need to guide them to the seat or to the bathroom. They sometimes have a loss of taste. They can have a loss of appetite, all kinds of things. Weakness. So sitting down in a chair to have their blood collected, getting up from the chair after having their blood collected, they're more of a risk, fall risk. They have more issues with memory loss, which is why we want to make sure we're informing them and making sure that they did fast if they need to, and making sure that they tell you their name and date of birth, and you check that against your requisition. Their veins roll a lot more because of muscle loss, and their skin is much thinner and will bruise much easier. They have increased hypothermia, so you want to take an added, it's like with infants and with elderly and with everyone really, but you have more of an issue with the elderly because they suffer from hypothermia, so you'll notice their hands get colder as they get older. So you want to make sure you warm that puncture site to make sure you get a good stick. They sometimes have increased sensitivities and allergies. That's why you want to make sure you find out if they're allergic to anything, such as latex. And they do deal with depression and anger. And we must always treat everyone with respect. So glucose monitoring. It's one of the most widely used point of care testing. Okay, this is a device to help monitor diabetics, right? And this is a test that is widely used in home health. Patients use them at home, and then a lot of these instruments can store the results, and then they can take them to their doctor's office and download them. If you happen to work for a home health agency, they may want you to go out there and demonstrate how to use the monitor. They may ask you to go out there and monitor and check the patient's glucose yourself. These are tests that you really need to understand and know how to use. All the stuff that we're going over is on page 350 all the way through page 353 in your textbook. So make sure you read over that as well, okay? So considerations in home care blood collection. If specimens are to be collected in homes, all procedures are similar except take extra care to do the following things. You want to make sure when you go to their homes, you want to take extra supplies. You want to make sure you have extra sharps containers. You never want to throw those needles away in a trash can at a home, and you want to train your patients to do the same. You still want to make sure you positively ID your patients. You want to make sure that your patients are not only comfortable and in a reclined position, but are safely seated. You want to make sure you use hand disinfectant. You want to locate, before you get started, the nearest bathroom, sink, towels, and all needed accessories prior to the procedure. You want to carefully dispose and remove all supplies. Just because you're doing this out in the home does not mean that you still do not need to adhere to the strict rules we have for how to dispose of your supplies. You want to label and place in a leak-proof container for transport, because as these items are in your car, if you were to have to slam on brakes suddenly, or if you were to reach over and something fell on the floor, you do not want blood or other body fluids leaking out in a transport container or in your floor. You also want to make sure you're transporting these things at appropriate temperatures. We all know how hot it can be in Louisiana in the summer, and we wouldn't want to leave urine or blood or any other specimen in the car at high temperatures. You always want to make sure you have your cell phone with you, and you want to make sure that you have some type of GPS mapping to be able to find your way around in areas. Try to have an idea of where you're going and the crime rate in that area just to keep yourself safe. And if you have any delays due to a train, a car wreck, or being held up at another person's home, please make sure you document that immediately as leaving the home so that if you're asked about what went on, you can properly articulate to the home health agency and to your supervisors what was going on. We have a tendency as time passes by, if we don't document it immediately, we may not remember the exact times and reasons for why we were delayed. Here's one of our critical thinking slides. Remember, take that time to pause your video and make sure that you're able to answer these questions properly so that you know you are taking the things you learn in both lab and lecture and able to put them together to be able to properly handle situations out in the field. Okay, continuing with doing glucose monitoring. This is a detailed listing of what you do. And with any skin puncturing test that we do, we want to make sure that we introduce ourselves, make sure we ID our patient properly. We want to make sure whatever puncture site we're doing, any skin puncture site we're doing, is well warmed. We want to make sure that we cleanse our skin with 70% isopropyl alcohol, massage our fingers beforehand to make sure that they're warm, okay? Then we never want to hold the patient's finger in our hand. We want to lay it flat, and then once the alcohol is dried, we make a swift, quick, deep puncture of our finger. We wipe the first drop of blood away, right? And if we're using the Hemocure micro cuvette system to do our glucose, then we wipe the first 3 drops of blood away for this particular instrument. And we always want to read the manufacturing package insert that comes with the instrument to make sure we're properly trained on how to use every instrument that may be in our point of care testing laboratory or our physician's office laboratory, okay? So then we use, and if you'll notice right down here, and we talked before about this is a special Lancet, this is a special collection device, excuse me, that comes with the Hemocure, okay? And if you notice, after you poked your finger and you wipe the first drops of blood away, then you touch it to the drop of blood and it pulls the blood by capillary action or traction into the micro cuvette, okay? Then you can wipe the excess blood away from the cuvette. You place the cuvette into the machine and it has a photometer inside it. Test results display automatically. Other blood glucose monitors that you can use are the AccuCheck. We got the Freestyle. There's plenty of different glucose monitors out there that can be used for bedside testing or at-home testing. So talking about quality and point of care testing, we want to make sure that these results are accurate and reliable. And so again, make sure that you are reading through all this in your textbook as well. Okay, so the most prominent ketone in the blood of uncontrolled diabetics is beta-hydroxyburiatic acid, okay? The hormone released from the pancreas that affects blood glucose levels is insulin. So do blood glucose monitoring instruments require calibration, quality control, and maintenance? Of course they do. 2 levels of quality control must be run each 8-hour shift each day of patient testing on all instruments. Control values are plotted on a chart and graphed, okay? And QC values must fall within upper and lower limits called tolerance limits. Tolerance limits are determined by pooling QC data obtained during a 30-day period. Tolerance limits, upper and lower limits, are set based on the fact that 95% of the values would fall within plus or minus 2 standard deviations of the mean. So we know if a daily control value exceeds the tolerance limits, corrective action must be taken. You must stop testing with that instrument, and you must do something to make sure that that instrument, you clean it, you get out new test strips, you replace the batteries. There is troubleshooting things that you do. Then you rerun your quality control. If your quality control is then falls within range, then you can start using it. If it doesn't, you do not need to use that instrument on any patients or report out any results on any patient until that instrument is working properly. Specimens, reagents, and/or controls must be stored at proper temperature. If not, then they cannot be used. And a lot of times, if all of a sudden your QC doesn't work, sometimes it's because someone has left the cap off the top of the reagent and moisture has damaged the reagent strips, or they've been left out at room temperature for too long, or they've been in too hot of an area for too long, and now they're not working. And that's one of those things that you can do. Get out a new box of test strips and try them, and then if you run your controls and they work, then you know that's what the issue is. And then you may need to go back and talk to your supervisor, because we may have someone that's using these test strips that needs to be re-educated on the proper use of the reagents. If you did not allow your alcohol to dry on your patient's skin before skin puncture, that can cause erroneous results and issues. If you don't use the wrong volume, if your wiping timing of your procedure is not correct, if you didn't clean your instrument, if the reagents are out of date, if the patient either was dieting or fasted, or if there's some kind of transcription errors, or if the batteries aren't working properly. These are all things that you can do to find the problem with your machine that could be the possible problem, right? And then be able to run your controls again, get them in range so that you can then use that instrument on your patients and feel good that the testing you're putting out is correct. So here's another one of our situations that we want to analyze. So stop your computer if you need to, or you should, and see if you can get the right answer. Okay, so blood gas and electrolyte analysis. In the blood gas analysis, the blood pH determines whether the blood is too acidic or too alkaline, and the pressure of the oxygen, the PO2, and the carbon dioxide, PCO2, is used to measure the blood gases whenever a patient has a heart or lung disorder. Point of care blood gas analysis is most commonly used for critical patients such as ER patients, critical care units, intensive cares, and sometimes in neonatal patients. In addition to monitoring blood gases, point of care instruments such as the Novastat Profile pH Ox Plus can measure blood electrolyte levels, sodium, potassium chloride, calcium, plus glucose and bicarbonate, and total carbon dioxide levels. Do these instruments require calibration, quality control, and maintenance? Of course they do. 2 levels of quality control must be run each 8-hour shift or each day the patient testing was done on all instruments. Continuing with point of care testing, now we're moving on to acute heart damage. Other point of care testing that we can use for cardiac are cardiostatus for the measurement of troponin T, myoglobin, and CK-MB, creatinine kinase MB, troponin T for the measurement of troponin T, and the hormone release after a myocardial infarction is troponin T. These are all tests that we do to find out if our patient may be having a heart attack, okay? These are measurements that we can do. And we do have some point of care testing that you might find that we use out in the field or in physicians' office labs so that we can get some results immediately so that we can take further care of our patients. Blood coagulation monitoring. Coagulation instruments for prothrombin time, PT, are the CoaguCheck system, ProTime, and more. You see them listed here. Okay? Coagulation tests monitor anticoagulation therapy such as heparin and warfarin. These are just added things that we can do. Even though skin puncture is not something that we recommend for blood coagulation monitoring, it has really helped us out in the field and at the bedside be able to monitor the anticoagulant therapy that these patients are getting. It really has helped a lot in monitoring that type of thing. The same with these. Any type of instrument that we use either in a large laboratory setting or in the bedside or in the patient's home needs to be calibrated, controls need to be ran and should be in order, and maintenance needs to be done. And 2 levels of control needs to be done every 8-hour shift when any patient testing has been done on any and all instruments. So, hematocrit, hemoglobin, and other hematology parameters. The hematocrit, which is the packed cell volume, represents the volume of circulating blood that is occupied by red blood cells. It is expressed as a percentage. Hematocrit values and hemoglobin levels aid in the diagnosis of anemia. The hemoglobin test is more accurate than the hematocrit test in the diagnosis and treatment of anemia. The Hemocure and the beta hemoglobin system is used to measure hemoglobin. What other ALHT can be tested for on a Hemocure instrument? The glucose. Remember earlier when I was telling you guys about the Hemocure and I showed you about wiping off the 3 drops of blood? Remember, that was for a glucose. It can also be used to test patients' hemoglobin levels. So the iHor automated cell counter is used to determine hematology parameters, including the ones listed below. We understand that platelet counts, WBC, RBC counts, hemoglobin, hematocrit, and platelet aggregation are all part of our complete blood count. The AccuTrend GC AccuCheck Instant Plus is a point-of-care test for cholesterol and blood glucose. We also have point-of-care meters used to screen cholesterol levels in the Accumeter. The Accumeter is a disposable one-step quantitative method. It uses no instrument. After blood application, visually evaluate the colored bar's height. These are just screening methods that we can use out in the field, at the patient's bedside, and at their home that really help us catch problems early so that we can better monitor and treat our patients as quickly as possible. Does that Accumeter require QC, calibration, and maintenance? No, because it's not an instrument. You can't calibrate it and you can't perform maintenance on that particular type of testing because it's not really an instrument. The future of laboratory testing. So what are some future trends we're looking at? We're looking at getting patients more in control over their own health care. We're using cell phone apps, different kinds of strips, and ways patients can test at home in the privacy and convenience of their home that is less invasive. Smartphones have the capability, more capability in them than astronauts did when we put an astronaut on the moon. So you look at the technology we have today, there's lots of things that we're going to be able to do in the privacy and safety of our home in much more or much less invasive manners. We also have different kinds of genetic profiling tests out there like 23andMe. We can use saliva to do a lot of these tests to find out if people are at risk for different diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. We can also find out when people are resistant or sensitive to medications. We can also find out if you're sensitive to lactose, to caffeine, and other issues. It brings up concerns that knowing a person has a genetic condition may cause him not to be able to get insurance, but we have to work with our politicians at a local, state, and federal level to make sure that we provide patients with the best health care they can get, but also protecting them from any kind of backlash over genetic testing. There's Theranos wellness testing. These are companies that are coming out. That all these things that you see here are ways that we are moving forward in healthcare. Okay, and we're looking at trying to do these tests off microfluids. We're looking at things where you just have to take 2 or 3 drops of blood collected in a tiny micro container, and that you have very fast turnaround times. That way we can really find out what's going on with our patients quickly. Also, this may be a cheap way to screen patients that would be less cost to Medicare. New additional point-of-care testing that have evolved are the DCA 2000 Plus analyzer, which measures hemoglobin A1C for maintaining blood glucose levels, a BiliCheck, which measures bilirubin in the forehead skin of newborns, OraQuick, which is an assay test for HIV. We really want to move forward with more and more point-of-care testing so we can catch problems as quickly as possible. But for each one of these tests, phlebotomists must learn blood collection requirements, preventative maintenance, QC and calibration requirements, along with ethical and legal implications of the test and proper record keeping. So in summary, we have went over our geriatric population and how point-of-care testing affects them. We've talked about glucose, blood gas, and electrolyte tests that can be done at point of care, heart test to catch heart damage early, coagulation test to monitor therapy to try to catch anemia earlier with hematocrit and hemoglobin testings, to try to be able to test cholesterol at an early stage, and future trending in point of care testing. So guys, make sure that you're watching these videos, filling out your study guides, and studying for these tests. Have a great day.